When the CEO of a billion-dollar conglomerate loses his prized French translator hours before sealing a historic deal, Janitor's shy daughter steps into the boardroom by mistake and walks out having rewritten everyone's fate. What she says stuns the room. What she does next changes the company forever. Scroll down and buckle in for a roller coaster of ambition, betrayal, and raw genius, told in one relentless, breathless paragraph. If this kind of dramatic fiction grips you, subscribe now for more high-stakes thrillers with unforgettable twists. The CEO of Evergrande Imports, Lionel Crest, stood fuming in his glass-walled office, overlooking the skyline of Manhattan. A coffee cup shattered on the ground, and a storm in his eyes, their key French translator, the one person capable of closing a $300 million deal with Paris-based Delacroix Frères, had just quit 2 hours before the negotiation that could define or destroy his legacy. And as the upper management scrambled to find alternatives, temp agencies were called, linguistic databases combed, even AI translation tools tested, and discarded in desperation until amidst the chaos, a cleaning woman named Marjorie stepped cautiously into the executive floor with a mop and bucket, tugging along her 17-year-old daughter Clara, who had come to help because their rent was overdue and her school had cut scholarships. And as Clara waited outside the boardroom, humming softly in French, Lionel overheard and spun around, like he'd seen a ghost, demanding, "Who the hell are you?" And Clara, startled, stammered, "I'm nobody." But when he pushed her to repeat what she'd just said in French, she not only did, but added her own interpretation of the sentence in perfect idiomatic nuance, revealing years of secret immersion. A gift inherited from her late French grandmother and honed through novels and YouTube lectures. And in a moment of wild, desperate instinct, Lionel dragged her into the meeting with the Delacroix brothers already seated, glaring at their watches, and introduced her as our new top interpreter, risking everything on a hunch and a teenager. In thrift store sneakers and, as Clara translated, the opening pleasantries with flawless rhythm. She began to sense hidden tensions in the room. The younger Delacroix's brother, Elien, kept cutting off the older peer and muttering side comments, in French meant to go unnoticed. But Clara, sharp and fearless, didn't just translate, she exposed, choosing to unveil subtle slights and backhanded suggestions that shifted the power dynamics entirely. When Pierre realized Clara was revealing his brother's underhanded attempts to sabotage the deal, he pulled Lionel aside and whispered, "Who is this girl?" To which Lionel replied, "The future." And as the hours unfolded, Clara not only facilitated the negotiation, but reshaped it, proposing a clause based on a loophole she'd read about in her spare time translating French business contracts. For practice, and her insight backed by Pierre's growing trust landed Evergrande a more favorable deal than even Lionel had envisioned. But just when Lionel thought he'd won the day, Clara politely declined the envelope he offered and turned down his internship offer with a soft, "Thank you, but I have other plans," stunning everyone and vanishing back into the service elevator with her mother until 3 weeks later, Evergrande's legal team received a cease and desist from a small startup called Clairvoyant Translations, whose founder, Clara Marjorie Dubois, had just patented a revolutionary translation, AI, that combined real-time linguistic accuracy with cultural nuance, and was now in talks with Delacroix Frères directly, who had grown disillusioned with Evergrande's corporate ethics and secretly funded Clara's startup, cutting Evergrande out entirely. And as Lionel watched the news that night, seeing Clara on a talk show speaking in 4 languages about ethics, power, and accessibility in global trade, he laughed not in anger, but in awe, realizing he hadn't lost a translator, that he'd met the new queen of international business. And as Evergrande's board demanded answers and rivals circled like sharks, Lionel simply poured a new cup of coffee, smiled to himself, and whispered, "She changed everything," while Clara, now 21 and heading a tech empire from a Parisian loft, received a handwritten note from Lionel that read, "If you ever want the CEO seat, it's yours." But she merely smiled, folded the note into her journal, and stepped into a new meeting with the United Nations, where she was asked to mediate trade policy between France and 5 African nations, And as she translated their hopes, frustrations, and dreams, not just words, but meaning, she knew that destiny doesn't always knock. The floor outside your door? Want more gripping stories where the underdog rewrites the rules? Hit subscribe and never miss a tale that twists, stuns, and inspires. Asterisk.